Hello, and thank you for joining me today. I'm Jan Clothier of Thinking Stamping, and I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator based in New Zealand. And today I'd like to share with you how I made this card, which I did for a sketch challenge at Freshly Made Sketches. A sketch is always a really good way to get yourself going when your mojo's a little bit on AWOL, as mine was, and so I've used this sketch to springboard into this card using the season of Chic Sweet that you can see here before. And if you've watched me before, you know that this is one of my favourite sweets from the new 2022 to 2023 annual catalogue. Okay, so we'll get started with what you need to make this card. So obviously the season of Chic Sweet. And I've used as my base, I've used a heavy basic white card. It's cut, it's half of an A4 piece of paper, so it's 21 centimetres wide and scored at 10.5, and it's cut 14.8 centimetres that way. Now, if you don't use metric measurements, just use whatever your standard card base is, and I'm sure it will work out just fine. So a nice heavy card base. I've got two pieces of basic white that are cut half a centimetre or 5 millimetres smaller than the card front, so 10 centimetres that way and 14.3 that way. And again, if you're not using metric, half a centimetre is roughly 1/4 of an inch less. Okay, so one of them I'm going to use for the inside, and so I'm just going to pop that aside because we won't need it just yet. The other half, you can see, is already embossed, and I have used from the July to December mini catalogue this beautiful new folder, Leaf Fall. Now, because on this card I've got a sweep going from the top right down to the bottom corner, when I embossed, I made sure that I did it so that I got the paper with the same kind of leaf fall that I wanted. So just when you're doing the embossing, just make sure you pop it in so that you're going to get that top corner left empty. Right, so I've done that. Now, a little strip for the sentiment. I have cut this at 3/4 of an inch, and I have done that on purpose because I'm using the Pick Lovely, whatever this is called, the Lovely Labels punch, and the 3 slots are half an inch, 3/4 of an inch, and a full inch. So I deliberately made it 3/4 of an inch so that I could cut the ends using that. And in a little bit of mixed measurement, it's about 7 centimetres long, and I'm going to do the sentiment on that. Sorry, I have 2 in case I make a mistake. And the other thing that you're going to need are obviously something to make these lovely little lattices and something to make these leaves. So we'll deal with the lattices first. Now, to make them, I used another favourite from the annual catalogue, and that's these lovely split card texture dies. So I took this one and just a scrap of paper and cut a piece just like that. Doesn't matter about the overhang, because what I've done, and I've already done a couple here, is I've just cut out the piece of the lattice that I want. So I left one to show you. So I'm going to cut out that little piece just in there. So I'm going to go cutting up. Better make sure I do it right. Yep, I'm going to go cutting up here. And along here. Oops. Get rid of those bits. And I can see that I'm going to cut down here. And again, just making sure where I'm going. And I'm just going to cut down there. And I don't need that little bit in there either. Okay, so that's how I've made those 3 little pieces of lattice. And so obviously you're going to need 3 scraps of paper to do that with. There are my 3 lattices. And then to make the leaves, what I have is a piece of shimmery white. Now, it can be any size that you want it to be, as long as it's big enough to take some of these leaf dies from the Chic die set that bundles with the Season of Chic stamp set. Now, because it's seasons, obviously there's seashells, there's flowers, there's leaves and there's snowflakes, but I'm interested in the leaf dies. So I'm going to take those out because I used some of all of them, because I worked on the theory that I was going to cut a lot of leaves and then pick the ones that I like the best to use. So I'll show you how I made the paper, how I turned that into these leaves. I'm just going to pop that out of the way so nothing untoward happens to it. I'm going to put down just a piece of paper towel just to help keep things clean, and the inks that I've used are Granny Apple Green and Shaded Spruce, but obviously you could use any coloured leaves that you're interested, any coloured inks that you particularly want these leaves to be. When I'm doing this kind of thing, I use my largest block, and I just get some ink, and I start off by just plonking some onto the block. Because it's all going to run together, so it doesn't really matter exactly how it goes. Now, I am going to do something in the hopes that this works for me. I'm going to put my embossed piece over here in the hopes that when I spritz this with water, some of the ink will blow onto that, because I accidentally discovered that that's what happened here. You can see my lovely little faint ink splatter came when I spritzed that, because my embossed piece had been sitting over off to the side of my workbench waiting to be splattered, and it accidentally got splattered well, I wasn't expecting it. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm just going to squirt this until the ink starts to run. I don't want dry patches, I want the ink to run. And that is exactly what's happened, you see. I've now got myself some lovely little, just fine sprays of ink over there. And if that hadn't happened, I would have had to have added them in accidentally. So that was just a nice little accidental discovery. Okay, so now that I've got that all nice and inky, I'm just going to get my piece of shimmery cardstock and splush it. And you can see the ink starts to just run together in nice little swirls, and then you just peel it off, usually a little more elegantly than that, and swipe up the block. Now, and you can just leave that. You can blitz that with your heat gun if you want to, or you can just leave it to dry naturally off to the side. What I did was I did one earlier so that we wouldn't have to wait for it to dry. You can see I've actually already cut some pieces out of it. And so you saw what I did. I took all of the leaf dies that I had from the set, and I just put them around on my piece of paper in different places so that I would get different coloured leaves from it. And the one that I did for my sample card, that's the one I did for my sample card, and you can see the inks moved around quite differently, and that's why in my sample I've got some quite bluey looking pieces where the shaded spruce just spread without really necessarily merging in with the Granny Apple Green. So that's the fun bit. When it dries, when this piece here dries, you would just take it away and lay out your dies wherever you think the ink pattern looks interesting. Okay, but as I say, I've already done it for you. Now, it just turns to a bit of putting together now. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take that embossed piece, and I really like the way I've just got very, very soft splatters on it, just to carry those colours of the leaves through a little bit. Right, we're just going to put on the lattice. So we're doing that off to one side like that. And of course, when you're doing intricate die cuts, the little tippy trick that I use is to just squirt my glue onto my silicone mat and use a little old piece of rubber sponge to ink it up. Okay, so once you've attached the lattice, then it is time to attach the embossed piece to the card front. So we'll just, a little bit of glue, remember, just not too much glue, just around the outside. You don't want so much that it will ooze, and if you think it's going to ooze, then you get your little piece of scrap sponge and just dabble it a little bit so that you don't end up with oozy glue in places where you don't want it. Okay, so we're just going to pop that on. Oops. And use your wiggle room to just make sure you've got it on nice and straight. Okay, so now I've got this little selection of leaves and I can work out where I'm going to put them. Now I can use my example card just to kind of give myself a bit of an idea, but this is the fun part. So you've got your sweep of embossed leaves coming down like that, so you probably want to try and replicate that, but really, you know, this is the fun bit. Just play around, do whatever you like really to have your leaves on, bearing in mind that our little sentiment is going to pop over there. Okay, so I'm just going to leave those because I think that's probably what I'll do, but I will do the sentiment next. Okay, now we're going to do the sentiment, and you can see that we've got a nice sort of two-tone sentiment going on there. So I'll show you how we did that. Started off with the lightest colour, which was the Granny Apple Green. And we're just going to ink that up. And then I'm going to get the darker colour, which is the shaded spruce, a sponge dauber. And I'm just going to daub along the bottom part. So hopefully the of you and the bottom of the thinking take on a darker green look. And then we're going to stamp that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, very nice. Okay, and then we're going to get the punch, and the reason that I cut this at 3/4 of an inch and not in centimetres is so that it will fit down that centre slot just nicely. And then pop it in there, and bingo, we have our nice little ends. So it's just a question of attaching everything now. So our same trick with the glue. Okay, and then finally we're just going to pop the sentiment up on dimensionals. I'm going to be very restrained. I'm only going to use 3. And we shall just flick the back off them. And pop that on. Now, as for embellishments, there's lots of beautiful, beautiful embellishments that we could use. But I thought that given that we have got sort of a green and bluish colour scheme going on, that I would use the faux sea glass shapes just to add in some touches. They come in a white, a bluey and a greeny. So we shall just have a little, oops, just have a little go with some of those just to pick up the colours. Whoops, I've stuck it on upside down. So we'll try that again because I think I just wrecked the adhesive on the back of that one. So we'll have some greens and perhaps some of the more bluey greens. And actually although I put more than that over there, I think we'll just leave it at that 3 for those. Now, on this card for the inside, what I did was I used some of my leftover leaves, and I've obviously got some leftover leaves there, and that is what I will do for that one as well. But I won't waste your time by letting you watch me do that, because I'm sure you're quite capable of gluing on some leaves off the inside on your own. Okay, so there we have it. A Season of Chic card made using the split texture lattice and some lovely watery coloured splattered ink smooshed leaves. Now, as always, I'm happy to answer questions if you have any, and I can be contacted through my blog or my Facebook page, the details of which are going to pop up on the end card and are in the video description below. As always, if you live in New Zealand and you'd like to shop with me, there are links to my online store in the video below and at the end card at the end of this video. So thank you very much for joining me, and I hope that you enjoyed it.